The legend of the HSS Nemesis grew stronger with each telling across the frontier worlds. In dusty spaceports and dimly lit bars, veterans and traders alike whispered about the human warship that had vanished without a trace. Some said it had been destroyed. Others believed it had found a way to slip between dimensions. The truth remained elusive. Another round called out a scared Terran trader at the Void's Edge, a popular establishment on Station Epsilon. Let me tell you youngsters about a real ship, not these mass-produced cruisers you pilot today. The small gathering of pilots leaned in. Most were too young to remember the war, but the older ones exchanged knowing glances. The Nemesis wasn't just any warship. The trader continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. She was built when humanity thought they might be wiped out. No expense spared. No safety protocol followed. They put everything into her. Weapons that could tear apart a small moon. Shields that could withstand a nova. And an AI rumored to be more alive than machine. A blue-skinned Arcturan scoffed. Human propaganda. Your kind always exaggerates your achievements. The old trader just smiled. Maybe so, but ask yourself why the Kravak signed the peace treaty so quickly after the Battle of Orion's Belt. One day they were winning. The next, they were begging for terms. Admiral Kang stood on the bridge of the GCS Vigilance, his posture rigid as ever. At 62 standard years, he represented the new generation of Confederation leadership, those who had studied the war but never experienced its horrors firsthand. He had built his career on facts, not legends. "Sir, we're picking up an unusual signal," reported Lieutenant Park, his fingers moving rapidly across the sensor array. "It's coming from the Epsilon Void, near the old quarantine zone." Kang frowned. Nothing good ever came from that region of space. Analysis. It's using encrypted protocols we haven't seen in decades. Actually, Park paused, his eyes widening. The computer says it matches human military signals from before the standardization accord. The bridge fell silent. Equipment from before the accord was considered antique at best, dangerous at worst. "Put it through," Kang ordered, his curiosity piqued despite his better judgment. The message was brief, distorted by time and distance. "Nemesis has returned." Kang dismissed it initially as a prank, perhaps from history enthusiasts or anti-Confederation rebels trying to stir up trouble. But something about the signal's complexity troubled him. The encryption was old but implemented with a sophistication that suggested military origins. "Track the source," he commanded, "and get me everything we have on the HSS Nemesis." The ship's historical database contained surprisingly little. Most records had been classified or lost during the post-war data purges. What remained painted a fragmented picture. Launched in 2783, last commanded by Captain Ji-hoon, participated in 14 major engagements against the Kravak, declared lost with all hands after the Battle of Orion's Belt. That night, Kang received an unexpected visitor in his private quarters. "Admiral Kang, I apologize for the intrusion," said Admiral Lee, one of the few remaining veterans who had served during the actual conflict. Though retired for 15 years, Lee still commanded respect throughout the fleet. "Admiral Lee, this is unexpected," Kang gestured to a chair. "What brings you aboard the Vigilance?" "Word travels fast when you start asking about the Nemesis," Lee said, lowering himself slowly into the offered seat. "I thought you might appreciate some context not found in the official records." Lee's weathered face seemed to age further as he spoke. The Nemesis wasn't just a warship. It was humanity's last hope, built in secret using technology we barely understood. Some of it salvaged from Kravak vessels, some of it developed by pushing science to its breaking point. "If it was so important, why isn't it in our tactical databases?" Kang asked. "Because after the war, many felt such weapons should never exist again. The peace was fragile. No one wanted to advertise having a ship that could potentially destroy an entire fleet." Lee paused. "Or worse." "Worse." The Nemesis carried experimental weapons, planet killers, and an AI system that could potentially operate without human oversight. Kang's blood ran cold. "And you're telling me this ship might still exist? If your signal is genuine, yes." Lee's eyes held a mix of fear and hope. "But understand this. If the Nemesis has returned after all these years, it means something has brought it back. That ship wouldn't resurface without reason." 3 days later, sensor stations along the border began detecting anomalies. Spatial distortions consistent with large-scale jumps from hyperspace. The pattern matched nothing in Confederation records. Kang stood again on his bridge, watching as analysts tried to make sense of the readings. The signal from the Nemesis had been verified as authentic by 3 separate intelligence agencies, though its source remained elusive. "Admiral," Park called out, his voice unsteady. "We're receiving another transmission on the same frequency. Audio only." The bridge speakers crackled to life, carrying a woman's voice, tired but resolute. "This is Captain Sun of the HSS Nemesis to any Confederation forces. The enemy returns. Prepare your defenses. We will rendezvous at coordinates to follow." Kang felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from the realization that myths sometimes walked back into reality, bringing with them the dangers of the past. The reconnaissance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Talon system, a forgotten corner of space that once housed a thriving mining operation. Now it was just another abandoned outpost, one of many casualties of the economic collapse that followed the war. Admiral Kang stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the GCS Vigilance, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. 5 ships had responded to his urgent call, not the force he'd hoped for, but all that could be spared on such short notice. "Sensor sweep complete, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Park. "We're detecting a large metallic mass near the old processing station." "On screen," Kang ordered, his voice steady despite the tension gripping his chest. The image shifted, and there it was, a ship unlike any in the modern Confederation fleet. Its hull was angular where modern designs favored curves, bristling with weapon ports where contemporary vessels concealed their armaments. The vessel was enormous, easily twice the length of the Vigilance, its dark hull marked with deep scars and impact craters that told stories of battles long past. "The HSS Nemesis," whispered Commander Moon, Kang's executive officer. "It's really her." Kang had seen images in the historical archives, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The Nemesis didn't just look like a warship. It looked like a weapon given form, built for a single purpose. "Life signs?" Kang asked. "Minimal power signatures," Park replied, adjusting his instruments. "Environmental systems seem to be functioning in some sections, but barely. No detectable life signs, but there's significant interference." Kang made his decision. "Move us in closer. Prepare a boarding team." As the Confederation ships approached, something unexpected happened. Power signatures across the Nemesis suddenly surged. Lights flickered to life along its massive hull, revealing faded emblems of Earth's old military forces. Weapon ports that had seemed dormant began to glow with energy. "Sir, the ship is powering up." Park's voice rose in alarm. "Energy readings are off the charts." "Hold position," Kang ordered, raising his hand. "Do not lock weapons. Repeat, weapons remain cold." The Nemesis now shone like a small sun, illuminating the darkness of space around it with blinding intensity. The ancient warship had awakened. "We're receiving a transmission," Park announced, surprise evident in his voice. "It's coming from the Nemesis." "On speakers," Kang commanded. A woman's voice filled the bridge, strong, clear, and carrying the unmistakable edge of someone who had seen too much combat. "This is Captain Han of the HSS Nemesis to approaching vessels. Identify yourselves immediately." Kang stepped forward. "This is Admiral Kang of the Galactic Confederation Navy. We received your signal and have come to investigate." "Captain Han, according to our records, the Nemesis was lost over 40 years ago." There was a long pause before the response came. "For you, perhaps. For me, the mission never ended." 6 hours later, Kang stood in what had once been the Nemesis's main briefing room. The air smelled stale despite the environmental system's best efforts. Captain Han sat across from him, a woman who should have been in her 70s, but appeared to be in her mid-30s, the miracle of cryostasis. After the Battle of Orion's Belt, we were heavily damaged, Han explained, her fingers wrapped around a cup of standard-issue Confederation tea. Our jump drives malfunctioned during escape. Instead of returning to Earth, we found ourselves deep in uncharted space. With no way home, Kang said softly. Han nodded. The ship's AI, ODIN, calculated that repairs would take years. With our crew dying from injuries and radiation poisoning, I made the call. ODN would handle repairs while survivors entered cryostasis. How many survived initially? Kang asked. 23 of a crew of 200, Han replied, her face showing no emotion. When ODN woke me last month, I was the only one left. The others, the pods failed over time. 40 years is beyond their design duration. Kang struggled to imagine the weight of such loss. And during those 40 years, Han's eyes hardened. ODIN continued our mission. We were built to gather intelligence on the Kravak. While I slept, this ship traveled deeper into their territory than any human vessel has ever gone. She stood up and walked to a display terminal, activating it with a touch. Star maps appeared, showing regions far beyond Confederation space. The enemy you've forgotten is returning, Han said, echoing her first transmission. I've seen them. The Kravak didn't accept defeat. They retreated to rebuild. They've spent decades preparing, developing new weapons, expanding their fleet. And now they're coming back. The war ended 40 years ago, Kang said carefully. We have treaties, diplomatic relations. With the faction that sued for peace, Han cut him off. But there were always hardliners, the ones who believe humans and other Confederation species should be eradicated. They'd been planning their return since the day the treaties were signed. Han turned to face Kang fully, her eyes reflecting the harsh light of the briefing room. Admiral, I understand this is difficult to accept, but I have the data to prove it. The Nemesis didn't just drift aimlessly for 4 decades. We observed, we recorded, and when ODIN detected their vanguard beginning to move toward Confederation space, he woke me up. Kang studied the star maps, noting the movement patterns Han had highlighted. If she was right, the Confederation faced a threat they weren't prepared for, a threat they had convinced themselves no longer existed. The Confederation Council will need more than star maps to mobilize, Kang said finally. For the first time, Han's stern expression broke into something resembling a smile. That's why we came back, Admiral. The Nemesis didn't just bring warnings, we brought proof. The Grand Chamber of the Confederation Council buzzed with tense voices. Representatives from 27 member species filled the tiered seating, their attention fixed on the holographic display at the center of the room. Captain Han stood beside it, her back straight despite her exhaustion. 3 weeks of non-stop debriefings had taken their toll, but her resolve remained unshaken. These images were captured by stealth drones deployed from the Nemesis, Han explained, gesturing to the projection showing massive shipyards hidden in a nebula. The Kravak have constructed over 200 warships of advanced design. Our analysis suggests they will be ready to launch within 6 months. Counselor Jin of the Human Alliance leaned forward. Captain, while we appreciate the Nemesis' return and the data you've brought, some questions remain. How could a single ship, damaged and with minimal crew, gather this intelligence without detection? Han nodded to a technician, and the display changed to show the Nemesis' unique hull composition. The original engineers incorporated salvaged Kravak technology into our stealth systems. The ship's AI adapted and improved these over time. Convenient, remarked the Thulian representative, his translucent skin pulsing with skepticism. A mythical ship returns with tales of impending doom, just as military funding was set to decrease. Admiral Kang stepped forward. Counselors, I've personally verified the authenticity of this data. The ship's logs show 40 years of continuous operation. No one could fabricate this level of detail. The debate continued for hours. Some counselors demanded immediate action, while others called for diplomatic initiatives to contact the supposed Kravak forces. A few dismissed the evidence entirely. Outside the chamber, Han found a quiet corner and closed her eyes. The political maneuvering was foreign to her. In her time, humanity had faced extinction. Decisions came quickly when survival was at stake. "They'll come around," said a voice beside her. Han opened her eyes to see Admiral Kang offering a cup of water. "We don't have time for them to come around," Han replied, accepting the drink. "Every day we waste in debate is another day that Kravak prepare." Kang smiled slightly. Politics moves slowly, but when it finally moves, it carries great momentum. Trust me. 3 days later, that momentum began to build. The Council authorized a special reconnaissance mission to verify Han's claims. When the scout ships returned with their own footage of Kravak fleet movements, the mood shifted dramatically. Emergency funding was approved. Defense platforms along the border received upgrades. Most importantly, the Nemesis was granted official status within the Confederation fleet, with Captain Han reinstated to full command. Within weeks, the ancient warship became the center of frantic activity. The space dock around it swarmed with shuttles as research teams from across the Confederation arrived to study its systems. "It's like watching children discover fire," Han remarked to Engineer Choi, who had been assigned as chief technical liaison. They stood on an observation platform overlooking the Nemesis's main weapons array, a system 3 generations ahead of current Confederation technology. Choi adjusted her glasses. "Some of these designs break our understanding of physics. The targeting system alone could revolutionize our defenses." "That was humanity's specialty back then," Han said. "When pushed to the brink, we created things that shouldn't have been possible." While scientists studied the ship, Admiral Kang and Captain Han worked to prepare the Confederation's military forces. They converted a storage bay on the Nemesis into a tactical center, filling it with data on current fleet dispositions and defensive capabilities. "Our outer colonies are the most vulnerable," Kang explained, highlighting systems near the border. "Minimal defenses, scattered population, easy targets." Han studied the map. "The Kravak won't waste time on small settlements. They'll strike at manufacturing centers and shipyards first, trying to cripple our ability to build more ships." "How can you be sure?" asked Commander Park, who had transferred from the Vigilance to serve as Kang's aide. "Because it's what I would do," Han replied simply. "Cut off the head, then deal with the body at leisure." Late one night, as the Nemesis underwent its refit, Han wandered the ship's corridors alone. Most sections had been modernized, with new lighting and updated control panels, but the heart of the vessel remained unchanged. She placed her hand against a bulkhead, feeling the faint vibration of the engines. "We've come a long way, old friend," she whispered. "Indeed we have, Captain," replied Odion, the ship's AI, through a nearby speaker. "Though I calculate a 78.3% probability that our journey is far from over." Han smiled. The Confederation Council had debated for days about whether to deactivate Odion, concerned about an AI that had operated independently for so long. In the end, Han's insistence that the ship and its intelligence were inseparable had prevailed. "What do you make of our new allies?" Han asked. "They lack the desperation that drove humanity during our time," Odion replied. "But they possess resources and technology we never had. The combination could prove effective." A soft alert chimed from Han's communicator. Admiral Kang was requesting her presence in the tactical center. When she arrived, she found him staring at a live feed from a border outpost. "It's begun," he said without turning. A Confederation mining colony at Proxima Station just went dark. Long-range sensors detected energy signatures matching the Kravak ships in your database. Han felt a strange mixture of dread and vindication. "How soon can we deploy?" "The Nemesis isn't fully refitted," Kang reminded her. "The weapons systems are still being calibrated, and half the hull plating needs replacement." "We fought in worse condition," Han replied, "and we don't have the luxury of waiting. If this is their first move, there will be more soon." Kang studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll inform the Council we're moving to active defense. The 7th Fleet can rendezvous with us at Junction Point Alpha." As they prepared departure orders, Han realized that despite 40 years in cryosleep, despite waking to a changed galaxy, some things remained constant. The weight of command, the cold calculation of acceptable losses, the grim determination needed to face an enemy that showed no mercy. The storm had arrived, and once again, the Nemesis would sail directly into it. "All stations report combat readiness," Commander Kim announced from the tactical station on the Nemesis bridge. Around him, the crew, a mix of veterans and specialists from across the Confederation, worked with focused intensity. None of them had expected to be here, facing the enemy so soon. 3 days earlier, the Kravak had struck without warning. 6 colonial outposts went dark in rapid succession. When Confederation response ships arrived, they found only debris and radiation. The attacks continued, moving inward toward more populated systems, following the exact pattern Captain Han had predicted. On the main view screen, the tactical display showed the advancing Kravak fleet, 17 vessels of various sizes, all heading toward the Antares Junction, a critical navigational hub connecting 5 major systems. Confederation Command still believes we should wait for reinforcements, Admiral Kang reminded Han, his face tight with concern on the communication screen. "The 7th Fleet will arrive in 26 hours. Captain Han shook her head. "By then, Antares will be lost, and they'll have a clear path to the inner colonies. We need to make our stand now." "The Nemesis isn't fully tested," Kang argued. "Half your weapon systems are still calibrating." Han's expression didn't change. "Admiral, request permission to deploy." Kang closed his eyes briefly. "Request denied, Captain. Stand down and await the fleet." The communication ended. The bridge fell silent as all eyes turned to Han. She sat motionless in the command chair for 30 seconds, then pressed a button on the armrest. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for immediate departure. We will deploy to Antares Junction under my authority. Anyone who wishes to remain behind may do so without penalty." Not a single crew member left their post. Commander Kim moved closer. "Captain, we're disobeying the direct order." "I'm disobeying," Han corrected him. "Log your objection if you must." "I wasn't objecting," Kim replied with a slight smile. "Just confirming." 6 hours later, the Nemesis dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Antares Junction. The massive ship moved silently into position, its newly refitted engines pushing it faster than should have been possible for a vessel its size. "ODN, tactical analysis," Han ordered. The ship's AI responded immediately. "Kravak fleet approaching from Vector 317. Estimated arrival in 42 minutes. Their current formation suggests they are not expecting significant resistance." "Then let's surprise them," Han said. "Deploy sensor drones. I want a complete picture of their approach." As the crew prepared for battle, Engineer Choi approached the command chair. "Captain, I should warn you that the main weapon array is only at 60% efficiency. We didn't have time to finish the calibrations." 60% of a Nemesis weapon is still more than most ships carry, Han replied. "We'll make it work." The first Kravak ships appeared exactly when ODN predicted. Their angular, obsidian vessels sliced through space like predatory fish, moving in perfect coordination. "They've detected us," reported the sensor officer. "They're adjusting course." Han leaned forward. "ODN, implement battle protocol Echo 3. The Nemesis powered down its main systems, appearing dead in space. Only minimal life support and passive sensors remained active. "What are we doing?" Kim whispered. "Fishing," Han replied. "The Kravak are cautious by nature. They'll send scouts to investigate before committing their main force." Sure enough, 3 smaller vessels broke from the Kravak formation accelerating toward the seemingly disabled nemesis. Han waited until they were within optimal range. Now, ODIN. Full power to all systems. Target the lead scout. The nemesis roared to life, its weapons charging with a sound that vibrated through the hull. The main cannon, a technology lost since the war, fired a concentrated beam of energy that cut through the lead Kravak scout ship like paper. The other scouts attempted evasive maneuvers, but the nemesis was already moving, executing a barrel roll that defied its size. Point defense turrets tracked and fired with impossible precision, tearing into the enemy vessels. How is this possible? Kim asked, watching as the massive warship performed maneuvers that should have torn it apart. Inertial dampeners, Engineer Choi explained, her eyes wide with excitement. The kind we theorized but could never build. The nemesis doesn't just cancel momentum, it redirects it. The main Kravak fleet accelerated in response to the destruction of their scouts. 14 warships, each bristling with weapons, formed an attack pattern designed to overwhelm a single target. They still think we're a conventional vessel, Han noted. ODIN. Prepare all special weapons. Targets of opportunity. What followed would later be described in Confederation military academies as the Antares miracle. The nemesis, outnumbered 14-1, executed a series of combat maneuvers that veteran pilots deemed impossible. It would dive directly toward enemy formations, only to spin and fire from unexpected angles. It would appear vulnerable, draw enemy fire, then reveal that the apparent weakness was a trap. When 3 Kravak cruisers coordinated their fire on the nemesis's port side, the ancient warship absorbed the hits through a shield technology that hadn't been seen in decades. The energy seemed to cycle through the ship's systems before being redirected back in a devastating counterattack. Hull integrity at 78%, ODIN reported after a particularly heavy barrage. Returning fire. The nemesis's main cannon fired again, the beam splitting into multiple trajectories that struck 5 enemy vessels simultaneously. 2 exploded immediately. The others listed in space, crippled. After 22 minutes of intense combat, the Kravak broke formation. Their remaining ships turned away from the Antares junction, accelerating into hyperspace. They're retreating, Kim said in disbelief. Han didn't share his enthusiasm. Scan the debris. Find me their command codes. Hours later, when Admiral Kang's fleet finally arrived, they found the nemesis surrounded by the wreckage of Kravak vessels. Despite sustaining damage to nearly every system, the ancient warship remained operational. In the tactical room, Han showed Kang the recovered data. These recognition codes confirm what I warned you about. The ships we faced were designated as Forward Scout Element. This was just their vanguard. Kang studied the information, then looked at Han with new respect. How did one ship defeat 14? Not just any ship, Han replied. And not just any crew. As repair teams worked to restore the nemesis, news of the battle spread throughout the Confederation. The legend had returned, and for the first time since the attacks began, people dared to hope. The nemesis floated in the center of the massive shipyard, surrounded by the skeletons of new vessels taking shape. Workers swarmed over the scaffolding, their welding tools creating small suns that briefly illuminated the darkness of space. Each new ship followed the distinctive angular design of the ancient human warship, though with modern refinements. Captain Han walked through the main hall of the Confederation Military Academy, where just months ago her warnings had been met with skepticism. Now, her image hung alongside other historical commanders. Cadets stopped and saluted as she passed, their eyes wide with recognition. The hero of Antares, one whispered to another. Han pretended not to hear. She had never wanted to be a hero or a legend. She had simply done her duty, as had her crew, most of whom now lay frozen in failed cryopods aboard the Nemesis, their sacrifices unknown to this new generation. Admiral Kang met her outside the simulation center, where dozens of pilots trained on replicas of the Nemesis's control systems. The Council approved the final production order, Kang informed her. 37 new ships based on Nemesis specifications with more to follow. We're calling them the Vanguard class. Han nodded, watching through the observation window as young officers from a dozen species worked to master maneuvers she had once performed instinctively. And they've officially extended your promotion offer, Kang continued. Fleet Admiral, with command of the new defensive initiative. You'd be overseeing the entire program. My answer hasn't changed, Han replied. My place is on the Nemesis. Kang sighed. We need your experience guiding the whole fleet, not just one ship. Then let me train them my way, Han said, turning to face him. Not from behind a desk signing orders, but in space, where it matters. 3 weeks later, Han stood in a training room filled with 200 newly commissioned officers. They represented every member species of the Confederation, humans, Arcturans, Thulians, and others, all watching her with a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation. You've all studied the Battle of Antares. Han began without preamble. Your instructors have shown you the maneuvers, the tactics, the weapon deployments. But they can't teach you the most important lesson. She paced slowly across the front of the room. Technical superiority didn't win that battle. The Nemesis prevailed because its crew understood something fundamental about warfare. It's not the ship that wins. It's the people willing to risk everything for victory. Over the following months, Han implemented a new training program. Instead of traditional exercises focused on procedures and protocols, she created scenarios that tested resolve and adaptability. Cadets faced simulations where victory seemed impossible, where standard tactics failed, where they had to innovate or perish. Many military traditionalists complained, but the results spoke for themselves. Graduates of Han's Crucible, as it became known, displayed combat effectiveness far beyond their counterparts. Meanwhile, intelligence gathered by Confederation scouts revealed the Kravak's response to their defeat at Antares. Their training simulations now included specific modules on countering Nemesis-type threats. Their fleet formations had been redesigned to protect against the maneuvers Han had pioneered. They fear you, Commander Kim noted during a strategy session. One ship, and you've changed their entire tactical approach. Good, Han replied. Fear makes them predictable. As the Nemesis underwent its final upgrades, integrating the best of old and new technologies, Han received unexpected information. ODN had decrypted additional data from the defeated Kravak ships, revealing the true scale of the coming invasion. It's worse than we thought, Han told the emergency session of the Confederation Council. The force we encountered was less than 5% of their fleet. They're coming with everything they have. The council chamber erupted in panicked discussions. Some advocated for immediate diplomatic outreach. Others suggested withdrawal from border regions to consolidate defenses. Han let them talk, standing silently beside the holographic display showing the approaching armada. When the noise finally subsided, she spoke. You're thinking like prey, she said quietly, calculating how to minimize losses, how to endure. That's not how you win against the Kravak. What would you suggest, Captain? Asked Counselor Jin. Stop waiting for them to come to us, Han replied. Form a battle group around the Nemesis and the new Vanguard ships. Let us take the fight to them, disrupt their staging areas, force them to defend instead of attack. The proposal was radical, against all conventional military doctrine, but conventional approaches had failed against the Kravak before. On the eve of the expedition's departure, the Academy hosted a final ceremony for the newly commissioned officers who would crew the fleet. The massive hall was filled to capacity, with representatives from every world in the Confederation. Han had never been comfortable with speeches, but as she looked out at the young faces before her, she understood the importance of this moment. 40 years ago, humanity faced extinction, she began. We survived not because we were stronger or smarter than our enemies, but because we refused to accept defeat. When all reasonable options were exhausted, we kept fighting. She gestured to the viewport, where the Nemesis could be seen in orbit, surrounded by the new Vanguard ships. The Nemesis wasn't exceptional because of its technology. It was exceptional because its crew never learned when to quit. That stubborn refusal to surrender is what makes humans dangerous. And it's what each of you, regardless of your species, must embrace. The next morning, the battle group assembled in high orbit. 27 ships formed around the Nemesis, their crews standing at attention as Captain Han transmitted her final message to Confederation Command. "Battle Group Vanguard ready for departure," she reported. "We will engage the enemy at coordinates Alpha 79 and disrupt their advance. Expect our return when the mission is complete." Admiral Kane's voice came through the comm system. "Godspeed, Captain Han. The Confederation stands with you." As the Nemesis led the fleet into hyperspace, images of their departure were transmitted across 1,000 worlds. For a generation that had known only uneasy peace, the sight of these ships, born from legend, crewed by the best the Confederation had to offer, kindled something long forgotten. Not just hope, but defiance. The myth had become their vanguard, and the nightmare of their enemies had only just begun.